Hey guys, tonight we're winding the clock back to a time when falling asleep was a full ritual, one stitched together by slipper supper, and a steaming kettle that never quite cooled. But before we dim the gaslights and tuck ourselves beneath layers of wool and whisper thin lace, tell me, how's your day been? Have you eaten anything delicious? Felt anything strange in the air today? I really hope your evening has settled gently, and that tonight your body gets the deep, uncomplicated rest it deserves. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop your location and the local time in the comments. I love seeing where you're all listening from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You sit by the hearth, the velvet curtains already drawn against the thick fog of an 1890s London evening. The air smells faintly of coal smoke and cinnamon biscuits. In your lap rests a heavy knitted shawl, hand-darned a little scratchy, but comfortingly so. Beside you, a ceramic pot of chamomile tea steams gently, resting on a coaster crocheted by your aunt sometime during Queen Victoria's Jubilee. A cat purrs nearby. If you don't have a cat in real life, imagine the warm weight of one anyway. You've earned it. In this house, sleep doesn't arrive uninvited, it's summoned with ceremony. You reach for your indoor slippers, soft leather lined with flannel. Victorians didn't believe in exposing one's feet to the cold, especially not before bed. Cold toes, they thought, led to poor circulation, foul dreams, and even if one particularly stern aunt is to be believed, a decline in moral character. You chuckle. Historians still argue whether Victorian sleep habits were more about comfort or social signaling. Was it really about better rest, or simply appearing proper while you did it? Evening meals were early, intentionally so. You're just now finishing yours, nothing too spicy, certainly nothing raw. A slice of boiled beef perhaps, or bread soaked in warm milk. No alcohol, not unless you want nightmares. Or so said Mrs. Beaton Britton's beloved authority on domestic affairs. Her recipes for sleep included nutmeg milk and sweat puddings. Yes, that's beef fat, and no, we don't judge. Your room's darkening, now lit only by a single oil lamp. The hallway beyond flickers like a memory. You imagine someone gently calling from another room. Have you brushed your hair? Victorians believed 100 strokes per night kept your mind soothed and your scalp morally aligned. Hair was oddly a nighttime fixation. Women often unpinned and brushed theirs out in slow, meditative silence, while men waxed poetic about ringlets and bonnets in their diaries. There's a small mirror on your dressing table, its surface fogged slightly from the kettle's recent visit. In its reflection, you check that your nightclothes are tidy. For the wealthy, these were crisp linen gowns with decorative pine tucks. For everyone else, cotton shifts or even re-sewn day clothes, but always long sleeves, and absolutely no bare feet. Tonight you're sharing the room with a cousin visiting from Bath. You each have your own twin bed, separated by a washstand. Privacy is a modern fantasy. She's humming some hymn under her breath, and you don't mind. It feels familiar, like listening to the wind press against a window, soft, repetitive, faintly holy. Sleep isn't just something that happens. Not here. It's cultivated, coaxed, ritualized. In Victorian times, the hour before bed was treated with an odd blend of solemnity and sentimentality. You wrote your journal by candlelight, kissed your mother's hand goodnight, and folded your day away as neatly as your waistcoat. Of course, not all households had the time or space for such niceties. But in every class, whether brick townhouse or thatched cottage, there was an unspoken agreement. Nighttime was for stillness, for hush, for gratitude even. And just as your lids begin to grow heavy, your cousin mutters something curious. Hope the spirits don't walk tonight, she's half joking. Probably. The clock on the mantel ticks with that particular wooden clunk. Only Victorian clocks make slow, deliberate, like it's carrying the weight of an entire century on its gears. You listen to it as you shuffle into your tiny washroom nook, where the porcelain basin gleams dully beneath the lamplight. Beside it sits a pitcher of tepid water and a cake of lavender soap cracked down the middle like an old promise. You wash your face, dabbing carefully with a flannel cloth. Splashing is discouraged bad manners, wasteful, and quite likely to rouse the dead if you ask your grandmother. Victorians believed in personal cleanliness, but only to a point. Daily full-body baths were rare outside the upper class. Instead, most people did a kind of patchwork, bathing a bit of the face under the arms, maybe behind the ears. For the rest, there was talcum powder perfume and denial. You pat your cheeks dry and smile at your reflection, which looks both exhausted and extremely proper. Victorians called this hour the drawing down of the day. And there's something comforting in that phrase. Like night is something you fold gently over yourself, one pleat at a time. Outside, the street lamps flicker, gaslit and ghostly. You can hear the clatter of a carriage wheel somewhere off in the fog. Maybe it's a night doctor, or a gentleman returning from his club coat buttoned up to the chin. But in here, you are sealed away. The house sighs around you, timbers, settling pipes, clicking, the cat making a strange noise in its sleep that sounds suspiciously like Latin. Back in the bedroom, your cousin's already turned over, whispering a prayer about safe passage through dreams. Nightmares were taken very seriously in the Victorian era. Some believed they were the result of indigestion. Others swore it was guilt seeping out through the unconscious. Either way, the solution was the same lie. Flat feet covered, think wholesome thoughts, and never ever fall asleep facing a mirror. Historians still argue whether these sleep beliefs stemmed more from Christian morality or sheer superstition. Probably both. This was, after all, the age of seances, mourning brooches, and taxidermied parrots dressed in waistcoats. You light a stick of rosemary to gently cleanse the air, not incense exactly, but close enough. Aromatics were a nighttime staple. Some even stitched dried herbs into their pillowcases, chamomile for calm hops, for sleep rosemary, for clearing of melancholy vapors. It's like aromatherapy, if aromatherapy came with a risk of setting your bed on fire. Then, just as you're tucking in, your cousin sits up abruptly. Did you check the keyhole? Ah yes, the keyhole. In many households, it was common to stuff a bit of cloth or tissue into the keyhole of your bedroom door before bed. Not for burglars, though, those existed, but for spirits. It was believed that ghosts, or worse, could slip through small openings. A reasonable concern when you've just spent the evening reading ghost stories by candlelight. You slide under the covers. The sheets are cold, but clean pressed and stiff like church linens. You lie very still, letting the weight of the blanket press down like a lullaby. Your breath slows. You count the ticking of the clock. And just as sleep begins to brush the edges of your thoughts, your mind flickers to the oddest detail. Someone once wrote a poem about bedsheets. 4 stanzas long, entirely about linen weave. The Victorians were thorough. You smile, then roll to your side away from the mirror. You wake in the dark, not fully just enough to hear it, the gentle creak of the house exhaling the muffled roll of carriage wheels in the distance, the soft groan of wood adjusting in the chill. It's not scary exactly. More like the world reminding you that it's still turning. Your body shifts under the quilt, a hand-sewn patchwork probably older than you, with squares cut from a mix of old blouses, baby dresses. And that one tablecloth your aunt always insisted had too much life left in it to throw away. The fabric smells like lavender and starch. Victorian bedrooms weren't meant to be warm, not really. Fireplaces were rare in sleeping rooms, unless you were wealthy. Most relied on bed curtains, hot bricks wrapped in flannel and layers. So many layers. If you're imagining one wool blanket, double it. Then add a feather-stuffed bolster, the size of a rolled-up rug. Comfort was important, but so was discipline. If you tossed too much in your sleep, it was said you lacked inner order. You glance at the washstand and wonder idly what time it is. There are no glowing clocks here, only that heavy ticking from the parlor, and the slow drip of water into the porcelain bowl, likely from the roof beam. Or from ghosts. Hard to say. Can you hear it too? Your cousin whispers. You nod in the dark. And then, of course, the laughter starts. Not ghostly human. It comes from the house next door, faint through the wall. A party. At this hour, in Victorian London, the line between propriety and eccentricity was often blurred, especially for artists who were infamous for holding salons that stretched until dawn. You imagine someone reciting Keats with dramatic flair while nursing a sherry. Historians still argue whether these late-night gatherings were breeding grounds for creativity or scandal. Perhaps both. Perhaps that's the point. But here in your quiet room, scandal feels miles away. You close your eyes again this time, listening to the sounds of the house. The ticking clock, the whispering cousin, the little puff of wind under the door. Victorian homes were built to breathe after all. Airtight insulation wasn't really a thing. Your mother probably shoved a rag under the door to keep the draft out and to keep out chill spirits thought to travel in cold air. The fire downstairs has long since burned low. You can still smell the faintest scent of coal smoke drifting up through the floorboards. It mixes oddly with the lavender from your pillow sachet and the rosewater your cousin insisted on dabbing behind her ears earlier. You breathe deeply. The air is sharp, brisk, slightly damp. It smells like dreams with a touch of mildew. Then there's a sudden rustle, just the cat who's apparently decided your bed is warmer than hers. She paces in a circle 3 times exactly, then settles at your feet. You whisper a thank you. Even in 1890, cats were nighttime guardians, believed to protect households from evil spirits, mice, and excess warmth, which in some corners of society was thought to soften the character. But before you drift again, you remember one last thing. You forgot to turn the lamp down fully. It flickers faintly in the corner, just a tongue of yellow light dancing inside the glass. You rise, adjust the dial, and slip back beneath the quilt. As you do, you catch a glimpse of the mirror again. Your reflection doesn't move, but it almost looks like it could. You decide not to think about that right now. You wake again, but this time it's not the creak of the walls or the cat shifting. It's morning. Not fully bright Victorian homes weren't known for generous windows, but the light has shifted soft and gray, filtering through lace curtains with just enough warmth to make you blink. The coals have cooled entirely. Your breath fogs the air as you sit up. It's a ritual, this slow waking. First the chill shock of air on your face, then the creak of your joints as you shuffle to the basin. No indoor plumbing here. You splash your face with yesterday's water, now cold as stone. And it does what coffee does today, wakes you with a jolt. Your underclothes go on first, of course, chemise drawers and wool stockings, all in faded cream and gray. Over that, a corset-laced snug, but not cruel. Not every Victorian woman tight-laced. Many simply wore corsets for posture, like a second skeleton stitched with ribbon. You tug the stays tighter and feel your spine straighten almost involuntarily. You and your cousin dress in semi-silence, the only sounds the soft tug of laces and the creak of the wardrobe. She mutters something about the milk being late again. You nod, distracted by choosing between the brown wool or the navy serge. You choose brown, it feels more awake. Breakfast is in the kitchen as it should be. It smells faintly of boiled oats and tea leaves. The table is already set porcelain cups with delicate chips, pewter spoons a sugar pot with only 2 lumps left. Butter curls on a cracked plate. And there's toast, but not the good kind. The kind made by holding bread on a long fork over the fire and hoping it doesn't catch. Don't forget the drippings your aunt calls. That's breakfast toast and beef fat. Not exactly continental, but warming. You sip your tea, carefully blowing steam away, eyes still half-lidded with sleep. The paper is already on the table. Its columns are dense, the ink smudged slightly from damp fingers. You glance over a headline about cholera outbreaks and flip instead to the classifieds. Lost dogs used corsets rooms to let. There's even an ad for electric corsets guaranteed to vibrate away unwanted curves. You laugh into your cup. Some things never change. Historians still argue whether Victorian diets were purposefully bland or just the result of limited spice trade in the lower classes. Either way, this toast tastes like sawdust and survival. Outside, the street begins to stir. Horses clop past, pulling milk carts and delivery wagons. Somewhere, a child screams with glee or defiance, and a woman yells back in a thick Cockney accent. Through the window, you can see the neighbor's laundry, swaying between buildings like a line of tired flags. Petticoats, aprons, one mysterious sock. You think about your plan for the day. There's mending to be done, maybe some errands if the fog lifts. Your cousin wants to visit the chemist for more smelling salts, and you promise to tag along. Not that you believe in them most, we're just ammonia with perfume, but it feels nice to shop for potions, doesn't it? The coal scuttle clanks. The housemaid is refilling the stove, her hands blackened with soot, her apron tied in a knot too big for her frame. She glances up and gives you a curt nod. You smile back, trying not to look guilty. You've never had to carry coal in your life. Then comes the sound everyone dreads, the front bell. Sharp, metallic, and always inconvenient. The postman, likely. Or worse, Mrs. Haverly from next door, with her opinions on moral hygiene and her collection of judgmental cats. You freeze for a moment, unsure whether to answer. But the maid is already on her way, and you're already slipping your feet into boots. The day has begun. By the time you're out on the street, the air has shifted again. Still damp, still edged with coal dust and chimney soot, but now alive with motion. Horse carts rattle past, their wooden wheels clattering on cobblestones. A newsboy darts between them, hollering headlines you can't quite make out. Something about a parliament scandal. Or was it a bakery fire? Either way, he's far too chipper for someone awake at this hour. Your boots click as you walk, each step echoing faintly against brick and fog. The streets are tight here. Victorian London didn't believe in breathing room, and everything feels just slightly tilted, slightly askew. A shopkeeper lifts his awning across the way, revealing a window full of false teeth and pocket watches. You nod at him politely. He doesn't nod back, just grunts and goes back to his business. Your cousin pulls her shawl tighter as you pass a puddle too wide to step around. Rained last night, she mutters unnecessarily. You both know it always rains. In London, the weather is less about variety and more about how many different grays it can invent in one morning. You duck into the chemist's shop, where the air immediately shifts to a symphony of camphor lavender and chalk dust. Shelves line the walls, crowded with glass bottles in every shape and color. Blue glass for poisons, brown for tinctures, clear for anything too bland to be dangerous. The chemist himself is a skeletal man in a velvet waistcoat, his mustache curling like question marks on either side of his face. "Ladies," he says, bowing slightly, still suffering from vapors. "Just browsing," your cousin says cheerfully, which in Victorian parlance means yes, and please pretend it's not obvious. She flits toward the lozenges, but you're drawn to a small shelf labeled Hysteric Remedies. A bottle of nerve-calming syrup claims to contain laudanum rosewater and something called Spirit of Hartshorn. You turn it in your hand and realize there's no dosage label. Victorian medicine was, after all, about as precise as a dartboard in a windstorm. Historians still argue whether the era's fondness for these tonics was rooted in real need or clever marketing. But standing here among rows of glittering glass and promises of sleep, you get it. Who wouldn't want to believe in a bottle of peace? You purchase a small tin of chest-soothing lozenges because your cousin insists they work. You doubt it, but they come in a nice little tin, so there's that. Back outside, the city has thickened. Not just with people, but with noise. Street musicians saw away at fiddles. A man in a tall hat tries to sell you a miracle knife that never dulls. You nod, but walk faster. Then you reach the market. Oh, the market. Imagine chaos in edible form. Stalls brim with root vegetables still clinging to dirt. Fish glare up at you from beds of half-melted ice. Somewhere someone is cooking onions, and it hits your nose like a memory you didn't know you had. You stop at a cart of apples. They're small with wormy spots and uneven color. Nothing like the polished ones you'd find in a modern grocery store. But somehow they feel more honest. You pick out 4 and hand over a tuppence. A butcher bellows his prices behind you. Fresh lamb, fresh as your conscience, miss. You smirk. Your conscience isn't particularly fresh, but your appetite is. Your cousin buys a paper cone of roasted chestnuts, and the warmth bleeds through the parchment. She offers you one, and you burn your fingers before you taste it. Worth it. Someone bumps into you, mutters an apology, then disappears into the crowd. You check your pockets instinctively. Still there. You sigh with relief. Pickpockets are as common as fog in this part of town. You make your way toward the bakery, not for bread, but for the smell. Victorian bread isn't exactly romantic, but oh, that warm, yeasty scent curling out into the street, pure therapy. You linger there longer than necessary. A child walks past barefoot, balancing a tray of matches. She doesn't ask you to buy any. She just looks at you with wide, unreadable eyes, then keeps walking. Your cousin says it's time to head back. You nod. The day is barely started, but somehow you're already exhausted. City life in the 1880s isn't for the faint of heart or the clean of hemline. You return home with aching feet and a handful of squashed chestnuts in your pocket. The door creaks as it always does, long theatrical, and the faint smell of boiled cabbage greets you like a tired dog. Home, sweet Victorian home. Your cousin tosses her shawl onto a peg, already muttering about heating the parlor stove. The house is cold again, of course. Victorian houses are always either too cold or suspiciously warm in exactly the wrong room. And you've long since learned that central heating in this century means put on another petticoat. You carry the market basket into the kitchen where everything is wood iron or ceramic. The sink is just a basin. The oven is fueled by coal. The clock ticks so loudly it's practically a roommate. And there beside the hearth sits the kettle, your true confidant. You stoke the fire, coax it gently, and set the kettle to boil. Victorians loved tea, yes, but they worshipped ritual, and making tea was practically a sacrament. You reach for the tin of loose-leaf Darjeeling. It smells dry and earthy like libraries and grandmothers. You measure out a heaping spoonful because you don't do things by half and tip it into the pot. Steam curls up, making little ghosts in the air. You watch them dance. But tea isn't just for sipping, it's for talking. And tonight your cousin's gossip appetite is larger than her dinner. She pulls up a chair and starts in with a whisper that could peel wallpaper. Apparently, Mrs. Pembroke down the lane has hired a new scullery maid. She's French, your cousin says, as if that explains everything. You sip your tea and nod solemnly. She continues, and get this, she irons the sleeves before the collars. Madness. You pretend to be scandalized. In truth, ironing order ranks fairly low on your personal scale of chaos. Somewhere just above how much treacle is too much treacle. You both laugh softly because laughing too loudly in Victorian walls feels like a faux pas, and she switches topics to Mr. Caldwell's mysterious business trips. Apparently, he's taken to leaving the house at odd hours with a carpet bag and returning with empty jam jars. Historians still argue, you muse aloud, whether Mr. Caldwell is running a black market preserves ring or just hiding his obsession with marmalade. Your cousin giggles. Marmalade moonshine, she whispers. That nearly causes you to spit out your tea. Once the gossip is sufficiently aired and the fire starts to settle, your cousin excuses herself for a small nap, which you know by Victorian standards might last 4 hours. Naps were serious business, especially after mid-morning tea and market chatter. You tidy the table, stacking cups and brushing crumbs into the fire. A small mouse darts across the floorboards, pauses mid-scamper, then vanishes into a crack in the wall. You make a note to not tell your cousin. She doesn't do mice. The afternoon drifts in. You light a candle more for company than necessity. Outside, a fog is beginning to settle again, softening rooftops and turning alleyways into ghost stories. With the house quiet, you turn to a task less charming: laundry. Victorian laundry day was less toss and a load, and more prepare emotionally for battle. But you're just spot cleaning today, thank heaven. You pull out a woolen dress with a tea stain and take it to the scullery. The water is cold, of course. No plumbing miracle has occurred since breakfast. You soak the hem and scrub it with carbolic soap. It smells strongly of medicine and sheep, which you're told means clean. You'll just take their word for it. You hang the dress near the stove and wring out your sleeves. Water drips from your elbows like guilt from a confession. Later, you sit by the window with a biscuit you didn't earn. The fog has thickened. From here, the neighborhood looks like it's slowly vanishing. It's oddly peaceful watching the world go fuzzy. Your thoughts drift to the street performers, to the girl selling matches, to Mrs. Pembroke's ironing hierarchy, and to how oddly satisfying this biscuit is. There's something deliciously boring about it all. Victorian life isn't glamorous, but it is full. Full of small rituals, full of quiet absurdities, full of smells you can't describe but will never forget. And when the day unfolds, like this slow textured absurd, it's easy to forget the soot, the cold, the mystery jam smuggler next door. You lean your head against the glass, just for a moment, and breathe. By now evening is creeping in though. In Victorian London, it never quite arrives with fanfare. It slips in, slowly turning windows into mirrors and gas lamps into glowing halos. The city doesn't get quieter exactly. It just changes pitch. You can hear the difference. The clatter becomes more rhythmic, the shouting more muted, as if London itself is settling into a wool blanket. You light a few more candles, their flames flickering like uncertain thoughts. The parlor is dim but warm. You decide it's time to write a letter. Not because you have something urgent to say, but because it feels proper. Writing letters in this century is almost a personality trait. You take out your stationery, thick cream-colored with a faint lavender scent, and dip your pen in ink. The scratching sound is oddly satisfying, like tiny footsteps across paper. You begin, Dearest Maud. You don't know anyone named Maud, but the name feels right, so you continue. You write about the fog, about the chestnuts, about the girl with the match tray, and of course about Mr. Caldwell's suspicious marmalade runs. You wonder how long it will take this letter to reach a real or imagined Maud weeks, months. Maybe it doesn't matter. Victorian correspondence is as much about performance as connection. It's a game of tone, flourishes, and subtly veiled judgments. You try to include a quote from Byron. Fail. Settle for London is particularly damp this week, which feels both factual and poetic depending on your mood. You sign it with a flourish, then seal it with wax because this is 1882, and you are not a barbarian. Later, you prepare for supper. But don't get excited, it's more functional gruel than feast. Your cousin has boiled something unidentifiable in a pot that's been blackened by years of use. You suspect it contains barley onion and maybe regret. Still, the warmth is welcome, and you chew with the mild enthusiasm of someone who remembers there's treacle tart for dessert. Over supper, your cousin tells you about the neighbor who claims to see ghosts. She says her cat talks at night, she adds, stirring her gruel with theatrical disapproval. You nod solemnly, then murmur, "Must be a very polite cat." Your cousin snorts into her spoon. Later, she plays a few notes on the parlor piano, the melody slow and haunting. A folk tune, maybe? Or a hymn. Either way, it sounds like dust in sunlight. You watch her fingers dance across the keys, candlelight flickering on her knuckles. You think of how many evenings passed like this in quiet parlors, with lukewarm tea and simple tunes. Of all the things the Victorians got wrong, medicine plumbing sleeves too tight to lift anything, they understood evenings. They understood the gentle closing of a day. You stretch out on the fainting couch, a piece of furniture built more for drama than comfort, and listen to the music. Outside, a dog barks once. The fog has swallowed the street entirely now. The world is hushed, safe in its strange, sooty way. And tomorrow, it will all happen again. The fire's dimming now, its final embers glowering like sleepy eyes. You shuffle a shawl over your shoulders and glance toward the window. Nothing out there but fog gently curling against the glass, like it's trying to read your thoughts. Your cousin has gone to bed, her candle casting a tall, shivering shadow up the staircase. You hear the creak of each wooden step under her weight, the soft rustle of skirts, then silence. It's your favorite time of night. You decide to walk one last slow lap around the parlor before heading up yourself. This has become a sort of ritual, not for any reason beyond comfort. You pass the bookshelf, mostly unread, the embroidery hoop, still featuring only one half-finished duck, the tin of barley lozenges that taste faintly of boiled dust, and then back to the fire. On the mantelpiece, there's a small framed photograph, sepia-toned and slightly askew. A stern great-aunt, possibly, or maybe someone else's stern great-aunt. No one's sure anymore. Victorians had a habit of keeping unlabeled photographs around, as if mystery was part of the aesthetic. You snuff out the candles one by one, each extinguished flame, leaving a delicate curl of smoke, like a final sigh. And then you climb the narrow stairs, each one worn smooth by thousands of souls before yours. At the top, your room waits. The bed is high stuffed and swathed in enough quilts to crush a small horse. You climb in carefully, shifting the hot brick that's been warming the sheets. It's still radiating a deep, delicious heat. Outside, the wind hums against the shutters, low and steady, like a lullaby sung by the city itself. You lie there in that old room with its quiet ghosts and velvet wallpaper. A lace curtain dances ever so slightly from a breeze you can't feel. Somewhere below, in a neighbor's flat, a grandfather clock chimes midnight. A slow, deliberate count of time, as though reminding you that the 19th century is still ticking away, gently, gently, so as not to wake the neighbors. You close your eyes. and your thoughts drift not quite asleep, not quite awake. You think of marmalade jars and talking cats, of match girls and musical gas lamps, of quiet nights in loud cities, and how something so chaotic by day can feel so kind by night. You wonder in that drowsy way whether the city was always this soft after dark, or whether it only feels that way now because you're finally part of it. And just before sleep takes you, you think maybe London has always been best when it's done trying to impress anyone.